Okay, it is still the Sabbath on April 15th, and we are going to finish Jeremiah 52. And I wanted to be able to break this out, break 50 and 51 out. So this will be a short one, just finishing the end of the chapter. And this is mostly historical, so it's not a big hitter as far as prophecy goes. In verse 1, Zedekiah. It is in its way, because these are still things that God prophesied that were going to happen to, the Jews and to Benjamin. But these are mostly historically occurred back then, and are only generally applicable to the future. Zedekiah, in verse 1, was 120 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. Not our Jeremiah, but a different Jeremiah. And he did that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For through the anger of the Lord it came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, till he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And God said, do what the king of Babylon says. And Zedekiah said, And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and built forts against it round about. So the city was besieged unto the 11th year of the king Zedekiah. And in the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the famine was sore in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land. So everybody was starving to death. Generally applicable to the destruction of Babylon in the end time. Then was the city broken up, and all the men of war fled. So the 9th day of the 4th month, it's a fast day. Then the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled, and went forth out of the city by night, by the way of the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Now the Chaldeans were by the city round about, and they went by the way of the plain. So they ran away. Managed to sneak through there somehow in the dark. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued after the king and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. So if you haven't been to Jerusalem, it's not very far down to Jericho. It's kind of downhill and kind of steep in places. Pretty far down. I don't remember the altitude of Jerusalem, but it's fairly high up in the Judean hills, and Jericho's right down there by the Dead Sea, or a little higher than the Dead Sea. But, so they ran downhill a long ways, and then got caught by the Babylonians as soon as they got out on the plain and weren't running downhill. Then they took the king and carried him up unto the king of Babylon to Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. And the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He slew also the princes of Judah in Riblah. This is an ugly, ugly picture. So we go back up here and we look at Zedekiah. And he was 21 years old, and he reigned 11 years. So 32, 33 at the most. And he had sons. These were just little kids. Could have been more than 11 at the most, probably. Maybe he had a few kids before he was 21, but unlikely. Even so, he killed his kids right in front of him. King of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He slew also the princes of Judah in Riblah. The princes of Judah, that's a lot of people. There were a lot of princes in Judah. Judah was a big tribe. Then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in chains and carried him to Babylon and put him in prison till the day of his death. So what did Jeremiah say? Said, you'll go to Babylon, but you won't see it. And what happened?
Went to the other one.
And he didn't see it. Now, in the 5th month, the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, which served the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem, and burned the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and all the houses of the great men, burned he with fire. Don't think I'd want to be Nebuzaradan in the judgment. However, it was God's judgment to destroy his own temple and to destroy his own people. So there may be a way out of it, but I have my doubts. And all the army of the Chaldeans that were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls of Jerusalem round about. And I don't know if you guys know about destruction, but it's a lot easier to destroy things than it is to build things up. It takes a really short amount of time to tip some rocks off the walls and start general mayhem than it does to fix everything and make it nice. You can destroy a city in a matter of hours or days that takes many, many years to build back up. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive certain of the poor of the people, and the residue of the people that remained in the city, and those that fell away, that fell to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the multitude. So if somebody falls to a king, they become loyal, treasonous subjects. There's a difference between that and just being taken away captive to Babylon. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left certain of the poor of the land for vine dressers and for farmers. And also the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases, and the brazen sea that was in the house of the Lord, the Chaldeans broke and carried all the brass of them to Babylon. The pillars of brass, that's 2 witnesses right there. Boom. That's what they represent. God destroyed it and carried it all away. The cauldrons also, and the shovels, and the snuffers, and the bowls, and the spoons, and all the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took they away. The vessels of the temple. Descriptions of God's people leaving Babylon. They that bear the vessels of the temple. And the basins, and the fire pans, and the bowls, and the cauldrons, and the candlesticks, and the spoons, and the cups, that which was of gold in gold, and that which was of silver in silver, took the captain of the guard away. The 2 pillars, 1 sea, and 12 brazen bowls that were under the bases, which King Solomon had made in the house of the Lord, the brass of all these vessels was without weight. They didn't have any way to weigh it. And they didn't really care all that much. It was a lot of brass, and they're like, yeah. And back then, this was, Iron Age 1, maybe barely Iron Age 2, I think. If I'm getting that right. I think I'm getting it right. I know, we're still in the Bronze Age? No, I think we're still in the Bronze Age. I was thinking the other one. Yeah, this is early. Really early. And brass was expensive. And concerning the pillars, the height of 1 pillar was 18 cubits, and the fillet of 12 cubits did compass it, and the thickness thereof was 4 fingers, and it was hollow. So we're talking about, I don't know which cubits it was. I haven't studied this in a long time. I don't remember. I think they were 54 feet tall, if I remember right. Total of 54 feet, or right around that. And the pillars had their own height, and then there was the bowl on top. And 4 fingers thickness of brass and a giant pillar like that's something. And then they had the big bowls on top, which were filled with oil, and they were actually big giant candles. They were amazing. And the chapter of brass was upon it, and the height of 1 chapter was 5 cubits. So those are the chapters of the bowls. with the network and pomegranates upon the chapiters round about, all of brass. And the second pillar also had, and the pomegranates were like unto these. So, when you see the two witnesses and you look at Ezekiel's temple and you look at the symbology of the whole thing, this is pretty important because the two witnesses were on the same foundation with the rest of the temple, including the Holy of Holies. And they had ornaments on them, which the only other place there were ornaments were on the door and inside the temple. And they also had oil, massive amount of oil in them, and they were lit as torches, giant torches. And I'm not sure exactly what the reality of all that was, but there was a massive amount of light coming off of those things, just fire and light all the time. I don't know, it's singular. And I wish we had nearly as good a description of the porch, which I think they didn't describe it because God didn't allow them to. But it was 252 feet, if I'm remembering correctly, tall. And so basically 5 times the height of these two big brass pillars, which represents the Messiah. And the door was right there in the base of it. And you had to walk between the two pillars to get to the door, the way and the life. And then you went through that, and then you could go back into the Holy of Holies and whatnot, where the mercy seat was. It's all very interesting and highly applicable to how God is going to build his people up in the kingdom. Verse 22, and the chapter of brass was upon it, and the height of one chapter was 5 cubits, which is pretty tall, with network and pomegranates upon the chapters round about, all brass. And I'm pretty sure the network is how the oil got into the inside. It was for decoration, but I'm pretty sure that's also how the oil got to the inside. The second pillar also and the pomegranates were like unto these, and there were 96 pomegranates on a side, and all the pomegranates upon the network were 100 round about. So we see this little description in here, which is, usually you're going into Ezekiel or something, and then you go back and look at this. Chapter 52 and verse 24. And the captain of the guard took Sariah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, and the 3 keepers of the door. He took also out of the city an eunuch, which had the charge of the men of war, and 7 men of them that were near the king's person, which were found in the city, and the principal scribe of the host, who mustered the people of the land, and 70 men of the people of the land that were found in the midst of the city. So, a lot of important folks. So Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them and put them to death in Riblah in the land of Hamath. Thus Judah was carried away captive out of his own land. And, you see Sariah and Zephaniah, and you kind of are sad about that because we know who Zephaniah was. That's not the same Zephaniah, I'm pretty sure, but still, it was one of his kids. Thus Judah was carried away captive out of his own land. And this is the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive in the 7th year, 3,000 Jews and 23. So 3,023. In the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, he carried away from captive from Jerusalem 832 persons. And in the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the Jews 745 persons. All the persons were 4,600. Not many people. A lot of people died. Yeah. And it came to pass in the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, in the 25th day of the month, that Evil-Merodach, or Evil-Merodach, whatever his name is, king of Babylon, in the first year of his reign, lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and brought him forth out of prison, and spoke kindly unto him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon. Whoa. So when he lifted up his head, he didn't cut it off. It's always the first thing that comes to mind. He actually raised him up above the other kings of Babylon, still below himself, but there you go. And changed his prison garments, and he did continually eat bread before him all the days of his life. And for his diet there was a continual diet given him of the king of Babylon every day, a portion until the day of his death, all the days of his life. I suspect that Evil-Merodach was not terribly evil, just based upon what I know of God. His name is not... It's a very Babylonian name, though. It's not his... sorry, Evil-Merodach. No, Jehoiachin. But Evil-Merodach, too, both. Both the king of Babylon and the king of Israel, probably at that point, were both pretty nice guys, I suspect. And to me, it's natural here at the end of Jeremiah, to kind of go on to Daniel. But we're not going to go into Daniel now. We're going to finish that here. And this was just basically a little historical piece at the end, largely. Okay.